What's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit reading video. Let's get right into the stories. I was visiting my best friend in a foreign country. Now everyone is telling me that he doesn't exist. I'm sorry, the officer exhaled a cloud of smoke in my face. But no one with that name lives here, or has ever lived here. The old woman who'd called the cops on me had a face like a withered apple. She leaned out from behind the officer's brawny back and nodded as if to reinforce how crazy I must be. It was ridiculous. I had just stepped out to buy some fruit at the market, but it had taken longer than expected. When I got back, these psychos all started telling me that my best friend Ryan Fletcher, in whose apartment I'd left my luggage and passport and all of my money, didn't exist. There was a wall of neighbors behind the old woman now, their stupid smiling faces nodding up and down like bobbleheads. No, they confirmed, no Ryan Fletcher here. The worst part was that one of them, the bald guy in the leather jacket, had talked to Ryan and I on our way up the stairs less than an hour ago. Something was very, very wrong. I looked around stubbornly for some sign, some proof, but in the 30-odd minutes that I'd been gone, Ryan's name had even disappeared from the apartment buzzer. The officer let out another puff of smoke. This time it was short, dangerous, like the snort of an angry bull. As you see, the person you are looking for is not here, and you are disturbing the neighbors. You need to move on, or I have to charge you with vagancia. He waved his hand, struggling to find the English word. There must be some mistake. Ryan, there is no Ryan, the Spanish official snapped. Entonces, I can drive you to the nearest train station. You can call your embassy, arrange your return. He tossed his cigarette onto the cobblestones and snuffed it out, or I place you under arrest. It was a bumpy ride through the Brown Andalusian hills. Tiny villages just like the one where Ryan had moved to a year ago were scattered between huge groves of olive trees. I wondered if any of them held a secret as strange as the one I'd just left. The officer arranged my ticket with the station agent. They seemed to be old friends, and then waited for me to board my train. It would have been a kind gesture if it weren't for the obvious tension, the desire to see me go. Just like Ryan's neighbors had shown, there was one other thing, too, and it was the reason I got off the train at the next stop and wheedled a cab driver into taking me back to Ryan's town. I hadn't wanted to just leave, but fear of jail had gotten me moving. Walking to the officer's car, however, I noticed an orange plastic strip under a dumpster by the back exit to Ryan's apartment. It was a Nickelodeon watch, a match to the one I'd worn myself for 13 years. Ever since Ryan and I got them on a middle school class trip. I wasn't crazy. Ryan was in that town somewhere, and his ripped-off watch was underneath a dumpster. My best friend was in trouble. I had to go back. Dusk had fallen on the scruffy brown hills and jagged gorges by the time the cabbie dropped me off. All the money I had left wasn't nearly enough for the 40-minute taxi ride, and the driver started to shout. A light went on in a nearby house. If that cop caught me here again, all I could offer the cabbie was my phone. It was the latest iPhone, and without it I'd be truly disconnected. But what choice did I have? The cabbie grudgingly accepted on the condition that I'd pay him for real as soon as I could, with interest. It wasn't easy negotiating in with my high school Spanish, but at least it got him to keep his voice down. As the taxi rumbled back down the hill, there weren't many figures watching from their high, golden-lit village windows, but there were enough to make me nervous. Small-town nosiness alone didn't explain the watchfulness of this place. More than the echo of my footsteps followed me through the empty cobblestone streets. I was sure of it. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a scream, then another. The silence of the narrow streets and muggy Andalusian night magnified the agonized roars until they seemed to come from everywhere. I pushed myself against a crumbling wall, expecting mobs of psychopaths to charge out of the dark alleys and tear me limb from limb. But there was only the screaming, and somehow, it sounded like Ryan's voice. I'd seen the half-crumbled ruins of an ancient tower when I'd first arrived in town, walled off by construction fencing. It seemed to be coming from there. Sure enough, a faint light glowed from a basement-level window. As I slipped through a gap in the fencing and into the weeds, I realized that the tiny light was moving. Then another scream chilled my blood. I was getting closer. While the tower was in ruins, its dungeon was apparently intact. Heavy footsteps lumbered up the stairs. I heard a smoker's cough and rattling keys. I lay flat on the ground, hoping that the tall grass and shadows would hide me. The weary-eyed cop stepped out and closed the door. He locked the door behind him and lay his forehead against its cool wood like a man overwhelmed by his circumstances. The screaming continued, but neither the cop nor anyone else in town seemed to notice or care. Joder, Que hasta un puto giri hopalato nuestra puta maldition, he muttered to himself as he walked away, leaving the key in the lock. Once the cop was gone, I slipped inside the tower. The noise was even worse behind its thick stone walls. The agonized shout seemed to reverberate inside my skull, and of course, without my phone I had no light. I crawled like an animal into the humid darkness below. I could hear other things. Now, too, a body, or several, being slammed against metal bars, clanking chains, a scraping sound I didn't like to think about. Something horrible was happening down there. Feeling my way across a flagstone landing, I grasped something familiar. My luggage. The bastards had my luggage. I wasn't crazy. Ryan really was down here. But what was making him scream like that? In the short time we'd been together, Ryan had told me how well he got along with his neighbors. Now I was imagining those same people dressed in inquisitors' robes, torturing my friend with hot irons. At the bottom level, there were no inquisitors, just thick puddles of slime on the weathered floor and walls. The source of the screaming was so close I felt like I could reach out and touch it. I moved forward like a blind man, gripping the keyring tightly, just in case, I told myself, but in case of what, I wasn't sure. My hand closed around cold metal. Bars, chains rattled in pitch blackness ahead. "Adam," a hoarse voice asked, nearly made me scream myself. It was Ryan's voice, no doubt about it. "Is that you? What's going on? Man, are you all right?" I whispered back. "No," Ryan nearly growled. "It's these people, this place. They're nuts. Some kind of cult. They locked me in here, man, in chains. It hurt so bad. You've got to get me out of her." Ryan's voice broke off into a horrible wailing scream. I never imagined human lungs could make such an anguished sound. "Does it hurt that bad?" "Why, yeah," Ryan rasped. Please just hurry and get me out of here. There's a lever that unhooks the chains and opens the door on the wall. Hurry, please." The chains moved closer. More clanging followed. I realized that there was more than one cell down here in the darkness. Other voices, male and female, young and old, called out to me, "Ayudinos, por favor, ayudinos." Every voice was parchment dry from screaming. I fumbled for the lever Ryan had described, knocking something metal off a table in the process. An instinct of torture. I had no idea. What were all these people being locked up for? Human sacrifice? A punishment for breaking some cult's list of rules? I couldn't begin to guess, but they were clearly in terrible pain. I kept feeling for Ryan's lever and jumped at every shriek. When my hands found the worn iron lever, I pulled right away. But it took all my strength to set the ancient mechanism in motion. With a metallic screech, every cell door swung open and every shackle was released. Then all of the prisoners screamed at once. I covered my ears and crouched on the floor. Dozens of running footsteps rushed past me and up the stairs. I followed. Outside, someone was approaching the tower door. Los Laves Don Cano Eston. As Ryan and the rest burst through the door, I caught a glimpse of a police uniform, but only a glimpse. Ryan swung his hand at the middle-aged man's neck and screamed. The others returned his shriek in a horrible chorus as they poured into the nighttime streets. I'd never seen the middle-aged cop before, but I could only crouch terrified in the doorway while my best friend gouged at his throat. Ryan didn't stop, not even when the man's neck was nothing more than a gory mess. The rest of the screamers were jumping fences, pulling on doors, climbing up walls to find unlatched windows. Now two kinds of screams echoed through the village, those of the hunters and those of the hunted. Suddenly Ryan was in front of me, nostrils sniffing like he was following a scent, despite the awful yell coming from his lips. A Ronald McDonald smile covered his face. His eyes were as glossy and unseeing as those of a taxidermied animal. Rough hands grabbed me from behind and threw me to the ground. "Pero que has hecho? Que no has hecho? What have you done?" The cop whispered in that familiar smoke-worn voice. We watched as an elderly woman crawled up a stone wall, ripped open a window, and threw herself at the sleeping shapes inside. She was clawing and biting their most vulnerable parts before they could even wake up. The door of a village house flew open. A family fled toward their car, pursued by a pair of screamers. 3 shrieking school-aged girls leapt onto the mother, dragging her into the dirt. Their teeth glistened, crimson in the glow of the streetlights. "We must go." Carefully, the cop kept his hand on my back, making me keep low as we backed up through the weeds toward the hole in the fence. Our pace felt painfully slow, and it took every ounce of willpower I had to inch through the weeds on my belly instead of running like a panicked deer. By the time we reached the fence, my shirt was soaked with sweat. I was about to slip through the gap in the fence when I saw them. 2 freakishly extended shadows cast by the streetlights, screamers crossing the plaza. I didn't move, or even breathe, until those glossy-eyed faces had passed. Now I could see our destination, the cops' patrol car. parked in front of the silent town hall. All was quiet. The unearthly shrieks and sounds of violence seemed far away. Not even the spiky grass tickling my face moved in the sticky night air. 4 screams, 2 on either side of us, shattered the silence. "Hey, hurrah," the cop bellowed, "as fast as you can." He didn't look back when he took off, and I didn't either. But I heard the screamers who'd crept up on us from the other side of the fence charging across the cobblestones behind us. Down each narrow street, others heard their call and answered, closing us in from all directions. I ran to the car as fast as I could. Something wailed when I slammed the door. With disgust, I shoved its grasping broken hand back out into the night before slamming it again. Slams came from every direction, threatening to break the windows. Yet the cop backed out slowly, doing his best not to injure our attackers. Once free of the crowd, he stepped on the gas, sending the outdated police car careening through the olive groves and hairpin turns outside of town. He didn't stop until we reached a cliff overlooking the main plaza. Something was burning down there, and we could hear the screams even from so far away. The cop got out of the car, sighed, and lit a cigarette. I noticed the pistol at his hip for the first time. Why didn't you shoot them?" I panted. "Pews, tomorrow they will be just like you or me, with no memory of what they have done. It is the curse of this place. Feud pass our acule quiera. There are signs. When we see them, we lock the dangerous ones in the dungeon, like we have always done. The pain of being one of them. It is horrible, inaguantable. Something told me that the weary cop had been a screamer himself. Maybe more than once. You can't just leave. Some tried. They brought the curse with them, Lois Persian. Then they were killed. I think someone in the government must know. We get a little money, just enough to live on, in exchange for staying here." He snorted. "In the past, they just killed us, Intians, Nas Lammer and Brujos. Each time, the reach of the curse became larger and larger." "And Ryan?" I asked. "Tu amigo. He spent a night here before anyone in town knew or could stop him. We hoped he would not be affected. But once we saw the signs, it was already too late. I wanted to save you, Alminos, but now it is too late for you, too." He put out his cigarette and drew his pistol. "I've lived here ever since. I never imagined that this would be my life. I wish so much to see a new face. But please, don't come to visit. Not unless you plan to stay forever."